Hereford Cathedral, dedicated to the Virgin Mary and St Ethelbert. That's your postcard today. When you think of cathedrals, you maybe think of Canterbury, York, Durham, Gloucester. I don't readily think of Hereford with a cathedral. Why did Hereford warrant a cathedral?
The cathedral at Hereford was established, or rather the diocese was established in 676, so very early old foundation cathedral. Now, there's very old stories associating this area of the country with St. Peter, first the spread of the word and Christ throughout this country. Now, Hereford also was a very important political and economic area with both its agriculture and the fighting for the border between Wales and England. So not only was the cathedral important, it was a very important Norman fortress of a cathedral. So it was very squat, very sturdy, and very much a working man's church.
And has it changed much since then?
Not at all. It still retains a very open, very country sort of feel to the cathedral itself. It's very lively. It's not an enormous cathedral that belongs to the high church, for want of a better word. It's very much a working person's cathedral where country people have a place and a home to go to.
It is very different from the bigger cathedrals, can we call them?
Yes, yeah.
Which sort of appear to be much more formal.
Yes,
in a way.
Yeah.
Would that be a good word to use?
Yeah, very much so. I think back to the phrase a working man's church, the cathedral is certainly that. It's full of the beautiful decoration and ornamentation that is a testimony to the different craftsmen and local craftsmen at that who have worked on the cathedral throughout its history.
What is the most important factor in this church?
It's very difficult to say. People might say the famous medieval Mappa Mundi, the map of the world from medieval times drawn on a single animal skin. Other people may say the Chain Library, which dates from the 8th century, the earliest book there, which goes through to the present day. Other people might say the shrine of St. Thomas of Hereford, or different things within the building. But I think the most important thing is the building itself. Not only does it encompass all these things and give homes for them, but also the fabric of the building dates from 11th centuries, where we have some of the earliest parts of the building when building on this site was started in stone, through to the fine Lady Chapel, which is an exquisite piece of early English architecture. There's the perpendicular style that it can be seen very clearly and beautifully in the north transept. There's other decorative areas, and there's even the stonework that's going on today with our working stonemasons yard, where they're working on either the new building that was built and completed in 1996, or indeed restoration of the Lady Chapel, which is work that's happening at the moment. You can see some of the most traditional techniques and crafts going on site, just as they always have done.
Tell us about the shrine. Who was St. Thomas?
Thomas Cantilupe was Bishop of Hereford, made Bishop of Hereford in the later 1200s. He died in 1283 on a journey to contest a particular ruling that the Archbishop of Canterbury had made, and really Thomas Cantilupe went over his head and went straight to the Pope. Now, that isn't an over-ambitious move, because you should also know that Thomas Cantilupe held the position of Chancellor of England and was a very important political and social character. When he died on this mission for the people of the country, Hereford did not possess a saint at that time. Now, shortly after he died and his bones were brought back to the cathedral, a variety of different miracles started happening, and of course they became documented. A shrine was built in the cathedral, very early medieval shrine, so that we're talking about sort of pre-1300, the shrine being completed. Then, as the miracles started to become more and more common, known and more documented and fame spread, the shrine became a very busy, very busy place, and an even greater shrine was made and erected in the Lady Chapel. Now, it's significant to mention this because as time went on and the dissolution of the monasteries became a very powerful and iconoclastic force breaking the religious imagery of the country, it was the second and later shrine that seemed to take the brunt of this aggression, and it was the second shrine that was later at that time destroyed completely, so nothing survives of that. But as that acted as a decoy, if you like, for the first shrine, what we're left with here at Hereford Cathedral is the most complete example of a medieval saint's tomb.
Marvellous. So you have something again very unique here.
Absolutely.
Well, here's a very big surprise for me, because when I was told there was a chained library at Hereford Cathedral, I expected, like in some cathedrals, a little bit of a shelf, a few old chains,
Sure.
looking a bit dirty and rusty. But you've got a veritable library here.
It's the largest there is. It's the largest surviving chain library that exists in the world.
That is just music to my ears, because it's a first for Hereford and a first for Britain. And why has this one managed to remain intact when others haven't?
A number of important factors, not least that Hereford was never a monastic establishment. It was always a lay cathedral, one of the old foundation. So therefore, with the dissolution of the monasteries, the library here didn't suffer significantly. In fact, it was at that point that the library started to grow. Secondly, there has always been a library at Hereford Cathedral. In the very early medieval statutes, there's reference to a chancellor of the library, who we still have on the chapter today, and also reference to the librarian and the work that was going on here in terms of books at the cathedral. The earliest book we have is the 8th century Anglo-Saxon Gospel, and we have books from every period up to the present day from then.
The 8th century. I didn't know they had books going back to the 8th century. Okay, well, you hear of the Venerable Bede.
Absolutely.
And, but the next thing you think of when you come to books is Caxton, really. And the
Yeah.
German printing presses, isn't it?
Sure. Well, the most significant part of our collection is pre the working printing press. This is a time when making a book would have taken somebody up to 5 years to sit down and copy page for page an order that might have come in from a cathedral or a monastery, where very important scribes, who were very important people, would sit down and transcribe whole texts, which would then be bound in fantastic, beautiful leather with kid's skin over the covers, with oak boards. These were books that were made to last, and last they have.
Invaluable, priceless, all come to word. But what about the information in there? Can you still look through these books as a member of the public, or is it now so historic if you started to thumb through them it would fall apart?
This is still part of a working library. We have the uninterrupted library history, if you like, continuing upstairs from where we are in the working library. So that's the most recent books that have been brought and put on the shelves today, tomorrow, and for the future. This is the library history of Hereford into the future. Now, up there in the working library, we have a lot of information on these books, and indeed copies of these books on microfilm and microfiche, so people can actually study them. If they need to go to the primary sources, the books themselves, they can be removed, taken upstairs and used for research. They're not used in the same way that they would have been, where people would sit down on the benches, take them off these shelves, be able to read them without taking them away, hence the chains, but they are still used and still very much part of our working library here at Hereford Cathedral.
But those chains are on there, presumably not been put on recently, but go back in time, because books were so precious.
Absolutely. It's an interesting fact to know that at the time that these books were written, a book that had been transcribed and beautifully illuminated and illustrated with gold and some of the finest pigments and some of the finest artists, the book artists of the time, would have spent making them. An approximate comparison would be how much it would cost to buy a small farm or a small holding. That's how much one book would have been worth.
And the subject matter in them? Spiritual life?
Absolutely, yeah. Also a significant amount of canon law, because at the time that this library was made, the dean and chapter of the cathedral would have been the governors of the county and the legal affairs, and a lot of domestic disputes or political disputes would have been settled within the cathedral and by the canons of the cathedral. So a lot of these would have been legal reference books, but mainly theology.
I see a charter there that's just caught my eye. Charles II.
Yes.
Is that anything specific to this?
As you know, the Book of Common Prayer was issued by Charles II. That is the charter with our copy of the Book of Common Prayer, which has recently and interestingly been rewritten and edited for the year 2000. So in this display here we have our first Book of Common Prayer and the new issue,
Charter.
the new issue with Charles's Charter.
Lovely. Dominic, thank you very much.
Thanks.